Richard Syrett's Strange Planet, following the truth wherever it leads, exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites, revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak and a peg, grab a stool, and come gather around the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. Carlos Cagina is my technical producer. Ryan White is the live stream producer. Please take a moment and check out the YouTube and Rumble channel, Strange Planet. All right. So somewhere in the world, right now, there's an episode of The Twilight Zone playing. It remains one of the most cleverly crafted and iconic television shows of all time. Nick Parisi is standing by to give us a glimpse of the series and the man behind The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling. Serling was one of television's brightest, most literate pioneers and a true believer in the medium. He was known as the angry young man of Hollywood early on in his career, clashing with studio execs and sponsors in his quest to loosen the corporate grip of censorship. He battled to write freely on controversial topics, and he would maintain that outspokenness as an artist and a thinker throughout his career. He's most revered for having had the ability to produce works of drama that probed the human psyche in an imaginative and thoroughly unique way. His work demonstrated a deep love for humanity and a strong belief of a better tomorrow. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to explore the life and times of Rod Serling and his work, The Twilight Zone, Pre-Twilight Zone, and The Night Gallery, and more. Nick Parisi serves on the board of directors of the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to preserving and promoting Rod Serling's legacy. He's a former staff writer and editor for Good Times magazine in Long Island. He's also a musician and a vocalist. Back in 2010, his former band, Ariok, released a CD with the Serling-inspired title Between Light and Shadow on Retrospect Records. He lives in I'm going to need some help with this one, Ronkonkoma, New York. And he's the author of Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, with a foreword by Rod Serling's daughter, Anne Serling. Nicholas is also presenting Serling Fest 2022, being held this August in Binghamton, New York. Nicholas, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm well. Okay, so first of all, help me out with the where are you living exactly?
It's Ronkonkoma.
Ronkonkoma.
Ronkonkoma, yes.
There you go.
Your instinct may be to say Ronkonkoma, but it's Ronkonkoma.
Ronkonkoma. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's promote the Serling Fest 2022 right out of the gate, because this is great stuff you're doing. This is in Binghamton, New York. Give us the dates and the particulars.
It is, thanks. And I appreciate that, because this is a big event for us. It's going to be held August 12th, 13th, and 14th in Binghamton, New York. And Binghamton, it was Rod Serling's hometown. This was where he grew up. Rod Serling was born in Syracuse, New York, which is about an hour north of Binghamton. But when he was just about a year and a half old, the family moved to Binghamton, and he spent the rest of his formative years in Binghamton, and he loved his hometown. It's just one of those things. He loved his hometown. He held a great nostalgia for his hometown, a great yearning to go back to his childhood in Binghamton, and it's something he carried with him for the rest of his life. So, the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation is based in Binghamton. It was founded in Binghamton, and this is going to be our 6th Serling Fest, and it's going to be technically at 3 different places, but they're all very, very close together in Binghamton. But the main event is going to be on August 13th at the Forum Theater, the Broome County Forum Theater, all day long from 9 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night. And we do all sorts of things. We have screenings, we have trivia, we have raffle giveaways, we have a whole bunch of really great authors who are going to join us this year. Mark Zickery, author of The Twilight Zone Companion, will be with us. Anne Serling, of course, will be with us. Mark Dawidziak, who wrote Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Twilight Zone, will be with us. I'll be there. My book, Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, you mentioned. So it's a gathering of probably the greatest gathering of Serling experts you're ever going to find in one place, all together for 3 days of of nothing but tribute to Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone, but also things outside the Twilight Zone as well.
Not too many television writers have, scholarly works written about them. But there have been a number of scholarly works written about Rod Serling, including yours. How did you become a Rod Serling scholar?
Well, quite unintendedly, I guess. Not purposely, that's for sure. So I was like everybody else. I was a huge Twilight Zone fan when I was a kid. I watched it. I was mesmerized by from the time I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I just fell in love with the show. And I just became interested in learning more about what Rod Serling wrote outside of the Twilight Zone. So I became kind of a collector of information. I just wanted to gather as much information as I could about all the things Rod Serling wrote. And I have a kind of a completist mentality, as a collector. I think most collectors are like that. If you collect something, you want to collect all of that thing. If you collect, comic books, you want to collect maybe all of the one character that you like the most. You want to be complete about it. So I did that with information. I wanted to compile the most complete list and archive, so to speak, mental archive of Rod Serling's career. And so that was the idea behind the book. And it just kind of went from there. It kind of jumped from that thinking into a book.
How was his character shaped growing up in Binghamton? I'm guessing, he was born, 1925? So I'm guessing he listened to, radio dramas and mysteries and The Shadow and all that. But were there any particular shows or any particular performers that really influenced Rod Serling?
Yeah, sure. Well, he was born Christmas Day, 1924, so almost 1925, and he grew up in what he would consider to be an idyllic time. I mean, he had an idyllic childhood. At least that's the way he looked at it. And he had an older brother, Robert. His older brother, Robert, was, I believe, 6 years older than him. And he and his brother loved the things that that you think they would love. They loved radio shows, The Shadow for sure. Rod very quickly became a big fan of Arch Oboler and Norman Corwin. Those were the two that were big influences on him in terms of radio writers. But Rod pretty much, and he loved movies too, of course. He loved everything that you would imagine: comic books, the pulp magazines. He was a reader. He loved King Kong, was probably his favorite movie. So he was kind of a typical kid for the time, I think. And he just, he filled his mind with those things, with the radio shows and with pulp magazines and things like that. And then, when he was 18 years old in high school in Binghamton, the day after high school graduation, he went off to war. And that is kind of the dividing line for Rod Serling. I mean, he had this idyllic childhood that he, remembered so fondly, and it ended very, very abruptly by him joining the army and going off to war. And that shaped him in terms of, he then idealized that time of innocence that he was always trying to recapture it from that moment forward.
How did the experience in the Second World War and maybe afterwards, how did that shape because he had this tremendous sense of justice. How did that shape that?
Well, for one thing, I do think that to some extent, I think that Rod Serling was born with that sense of justice. I really do. I think that it was inherent in him somehow. It could have been genetic. He could have gotten it from his father, who was, by all accounts, a very, very smart man and a very, very moral man. So it certainly could have come from him. And it could also have come from the fact that he was a little guy. Rod Serling was a little guy. He was 5'5", maybe, on a tall day, I like to say. He was 5'5". And he, not that I don't think there's ever been any stories about Rod being bullied. Rod was a very, very popular kid. He was a gregarious kid. He liked to talk. He had lots and lots of friends. He played baseball. So I don't think he was ever bullied, but he had a sense of what it would be like to be bullied. And, I think that when he joined the army, listen, he was Jewish. He wanted to fight the Nazis, but I think he also had this idea that he was this country invading other countries. And, we got to do something about this. And the experience shaped him just profoundly. I mean, it just, it affected everything that Rod Serling was from that point forward, as a man, as a writer, as a thinker. He saw some terrible, terrible things during the war. He saw some major combat. He came back from the war, certainly with PTSD. I mean, they didn't call it that at the time, but he certainly had it. He had nightmares, he had flashbacks, and he had to deal with that for the rest of his life. And it shaped everything he wrote from that point forward. He wrote lots and lots of war-related stories in and out of the Twilight Zone, and it changed his way of thinking, I think, in general.
At what point did he decide he was going to write for this new medium of television?
Well, he was there. Rod got into television right at the ground floor. You know, he was there at the very, very infancy of television, 1949, 1950. His first television show produced on a national program was in 1950. And so he started out as a radio writer. He started by writing radio scripts, and by collecting rejection slips. I mean, he sent scripts to every radio series on the face of the earth, and they were all rejected over and over and over again. Even after he had gotten agents, they were still rejected over and over and over again. But he saw the writing on the wall when television came to be. When television came around, there were still, there were those people who were snobs about television. There were people who thought, this isn't going to last. It's a phase. It's, they had, kind of maybe some misplaced loyalty to radio. Like radio is more cerebral, and Rod had none of that. Rod saw the writing on the wall. He said, "This is the future. TV is where it's at." So he jumped on the TV bandwagon, so to speak. I mean, right away with both feet. So he just started sending really some of the same great scripts he wrote for radio. He would send to television series, and it took him a long time to break through, but he finally did, and then took off.
As a collector of all things, Rod Serling, do you have any of his original scripts?
Well, not original, but yes, I do have copies of lots of them. There, in researching the book, there are some archives that hold Rod Serling's collections of the original scripts, of his original radio scripts, original Twilight Zone scripts, original everything. And I was able to go through those archives in depth when I was doing research. So I do have lots of that stuff, and some of it is very, very interesting. He was writing. One misconception I think about Rod Serling is that the Twilight Zone was the first time that he wrote science fiction, and that is absolutely not the case. He wrote lots of science fiction before the Twilight Zone. Most of it didn't get produced because television just wasn't doing science fiction really before the Twilight Zone, very little anyway. And so it wasn't, it wasn't produced, but he did write. He always loved science fiction, loved it since he was a kid, reading those magazines, Analog and Amazing Stories and things like that. So he wrote a lot of science fiction and fantasy, time travel stuff, and going all the way back to his early radio days, he was into that.
A Town Turns to Dust has some science fiction elements, wouldn't you say?
Well, A Town Has Turned to Dust, if we're talking about the same script, that is the script that Rod wrote. That was supposed to be based on the Emmett Till kidnapping. Yeah, and they later remade it as a science fiction movie, made for cable movie, and which was a real good idea, I think, actually, to take that script and set it in a science fiction context. So they put some science fiction in it, but
that came later.
That came later. Yeah.
But and we'll come back around to that, but he did try and sort of sometimes he used science fiction, right, to disguise, to get it past the message, these controversial messages past the ad agencies and the censors and so forth. But we'll come back around to A Town Turns to Dust. Just sort of one more kind of, philosophical question before we dive right into his career, and that is, when you talk to younger people, and maybe they only know of the Twilight Zone because of the reboot that came out a couple of years ago, and what do you tell them about Rod Serling? How do you explain to them why he's so important even today?
Wow, that's a really great question, Rich. Well, the first thing I would say is that you would be surprised at how many younger people do know the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone. They first of all, the phrase Twilight Zone is just in our language. You don't even have to have ever seen an episode of the original series to know what the Twilight Zone means. You know that if you're in the Twilight Zone, it means something's off kilter, something is weird, something strange, something just doesn't make sense. So they know that. And if they know the Twilight Zone, then your work is half done for you, because they know what the imagination of Rod Serling was all about, and they know what those shows are like, and they probably enjoy it. But when I tell, forget about kids, and when I tell anybody what's important about Rod Serling, it's his humanity. It's the humanity that he put into his work, into the scripts, whether they were science fiction, fantasy, or not. It's the humanity that he put into those characters, into the messages. If the Twilight Zone was just a collection of twist endings that were shocking for the moment and then went away, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. We're only talking about it because Rod Serling made that show more than a collection of twist endings or spaceships or rockets or anything visual. It always had something deeper beneath the surface, and that's what's made it last for 60 years now.
So before Twilight Zone, there was Craft Theater, there was Playhouse 90, there was the Steel Hour. What work from that period jumps out at you as maybe his finest?
Well, I think Requiem for a Heavyweight for Playhouse 90 was the second episode of Playhouse 90, and that was almost certainly Rod's favorite piece of his own work. He was very, very proud of Requiem for a Heavyweight. I make the point in the book. I don't think I had to make this point really. Anybody who knows Rod Serling kind of is aware of this already. But Rod was his own toughest critic. Rod was his own harshest critic. He never gave himself a break, and he would criticize his own work to the nth degree. But Requiem for a Heavyweight was the one piece of work that he never said a bad word about. Requiem for a Heavyweight. That was something he really put his heart and soul into, and it was a triumph on all levels. And he was very, very proud of it. So I mean, that one does jump out at me as being the finest, probably before the Twilight Zone. Yeah.
He did a little boxing of his own, didn't he?
He sure did, yeah. In the army during basic training, he represented his unit, the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and by all accounts, he won 16 or 17 bouts in a row. He was a lightweight or a featherweight, really a featherweight, and in his 17th or 18th bout, he got demolished. He got killed. He broke his nose, and he was really just knocked for a loop. And he said, "All right, I think I'm done with it. I think I'm done with this." So that was it. But he always had a respect for boxing and for boxers. He had an affection for boxers in particular, because he just felt that these people who dedicate themselves to boxing, they are not prepared really to do anything else. And it's such a finite, any athlete really, but boxers particularly have such a finite shelf life. They can only do this for so long. And then when they're done, what do they do? Where do they go with their life? And that was Requiem for a Heavyweight. That was the existential, question about that show. Like, where does this guy go after he's done boxing? When they tell him, hey, you can't box anymore, what's he going to do with his life? And that Rod Serling was very sensitive to that question.
I saw an interview, and this is legendary. I think all Rod Serling fans talk about that interview he did with Mike Wallace, which was like 1958 or 59. It was just before he started the Twilight Zone, but he was alluding to this next series that he was going to do, and it was almost like he was looking forward to it as almost an opportunity to maybe relax a little bit, because he had been at war with the ad agencies and the sponsors and the studio execs for so long. He was just sick and tired of compromising himself, I guess. He wanted to write profound television dramas. So he was looking forward to the Twilight Zone in that capacity, but it didn't work out that way, did it? It wasn't like he got a chance to relax.
I don't know if Rod could relax. I don't know if he had that in him. He was constantly working, constantly thinking, constantly on the move. He was just, I don't know if he ever relaxed other than when he got to, on his boat on Lake Cayuga, and then in the summertime, that was probably about it. But yeah, the Twilight Zone, well, from that perspective, he did get to relax to some extent because, yeah, the battles with the sponsors and the network executives pretty much was done. The Twilight Zone really did take him out of that realm. He didn't really have to fight with them anymore because, a lot has been made about the Twilight Zone being able to address these issues through allegory, through science fiction, through fantasy, and kind of slip the issues past the sponsors. And I think that's somewhat true. That is true. And Rod Serling himself said plenty of times that that's one of the reasons he did the Twilight Zone was so he could get away with some of this stuff. But I think it also was just about the fact that the network and the sponsors weren't going to take a half-hour filmed science fiction series as seriously as they would take a 90-minute straight drama. In other words, Rod could do something like the Monsters That Do on Maple Street, which is as blatant a social commentary as you're ever going to get. And I don't think anybody could watch the show and not realize what Rod Serling is saying. I mean, it's not like it's subterfuge. I mean, he said what he wanted to say in that show, but he didn't get into any trouble with that show because it's like, leave Rod alone. He's in his little sandbox. Nobody cares about that half-hour science fiction show. It's for kids. It's not a big deal. It's not at 10 o'clock at night. It's, nobody cares. And they kind of gave him the leeway because they just didn't give the amount of respect to science fiction, I think, that they would have given. They weren't watching it as closely as they would watch a Playhouse 90 and say, hey, Rod, you got to change that line, because it's going to, it's going to bother the sponsors, south of the Mason-Dixon line. This is robots and aliens and spaceships, and it's just not going to be taken as seriously as that kind of stuff.
By design, I guess. Then he chose that genre by design. Although occasionally he did break format, and we'll discuss that as well. Over 5 seasons, 150 plus episodes. Rod Serling, his life and work and imagination. Nicholas Parisi is here. And we'll remind you once again when we come back about Serling Fest 2022 coming to Binghamton, New York for 3 days in August. Back with more of my conversation with Nicholas right after these.
In times of economic uncertainty and chaos, your money means nothing. You may not even be able to get it from your bank or ATM. And the money you do have in the stock market will go down and down. What you can bank on is gold and silver. Gold and silver have been a reliable and trusted form of currency for thousands of years. Gold and silver have never been worth zero, and typically gold holds its value during economic turmoil. Call the Gold Hotline now and learn how to protect your money and your assets with gold and silver. And learn how to set up a new IRA or roll over your current one into a gold-backed IRA. Protect your money from the next market crash with gold and silver. Call now for your free gold guide.
800-461-9694. 800-461-9694. 800-461-9694. That's 800-461-9694.
Do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Are you being audited or investigated? Has the IRS sent you a letter demanding payment? You may not owe what they claim. Make this free call to the tax doctor now. Let them negotiate with the IRS on your behalf.
800-626-4512. 800-626-4512. That's 800-626-4512.
If you're a diabetic, we have great news. You can end the painful finger sticks with a new CGM. Plus, they may be covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance. If you test and inject daily, you may qualify. Call US Med now to learn more.
800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. That's 800-817-2974.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
We are back with Nicholas Parisi. He serves on the board of directors of the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to preserving and promoting Rod Serling's legacy. And he is the author of Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, with a foreword by Rod's daughter, Anne Serling. And again, presenting Serling Fest 2022, being held this August in Binghamton, New York. How do we get more information, tickets, and so forth?
Thank you. Yeah, the website is serlingfest2022.com. And there you can find the link to buy tickets, and you'll also find the schedule of the exact events that are going on and the locations and everything else. So it's www.serlingfest2022.com, and you'll get everything there.
How did the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation come about?
Well, it started long before I became involved with it. It started in 1985, so about 10 years after Rod died. And it was started primarily by Rod Serling's really his first mentor, Helen Foley, a teacher of his at Binghamton High School, who taught him public speaking. And Helen Foley was, they were good friends. She was his teacher, but they were friends, and they stayed friends for the rest of Rod's life, even after he left high school. And she was a fan. She was an unabashed fan. She took a lot of pride in Rod's career and Rod's success, and she loved the guy, and he loved her. And so in 1985, she and a bunch of other of local Binghamton people who knew Rod personally said, we want to do something that can ensure that this man's work is not forgotten. And they started the foundation. It was originally the Rod Serling Memorial, or the Rod Serling Committee, the Rod Serling Memorial Committee, and then it became the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation. And it's a 501c3 charity. It's completely completely charity. It's none of us get paid for anything we do for the foundation. It is a labor of love for all of us, and I'm really happy to do it. And Serling Fest is our big event, big yearly fundraising event.
How many people are drawn to the Serling Fest typically?
Generally, I mean, we've had a couple hundred. It's not a huge event. If there's 200 to 300, that would probably be about right. I certainly hope we'll get more than that this year, but that's about where it's been. So I think one of the nice things I tell people about Serling Fest is that it's not, Comic-Con. You're not going to come and be swamped by 15,000 people and have to wait on lines and not be able to meet people and stuff. You come to Serling Fest, you're going to be able to sit and talk to Ann Serling. You're going to be able to sit and talk to Mark Zickery. You're going to be able to sit and talk to me and Mark DeWidziak and Tony Alvarella and all these people who have intimate knowledge of Rod Serling's work, and you're going to see things that you would not see otherwise. We screen very rare Rod appearances, interviews that you would never have seen before. We're going to end the Saturday night. We're going to end with a screening of 7 Days in May, feature film that Rod wrote. So you get to see it on the big screen. So it's just it's a really, really great gathering of aficionados of Rod Serling.
So we were talking about his battles in the early days on Craft Theater and Playhouse 90 and the Steel Hour with sponsors and ad agencies and the studio execs and the censors. And he would usually lose. I mean, he would fight the good fight, I want that line in there. I want the show told this way. And he'd lose. And then he'd go and, kind of gripe to the media about it. And I guess hence the title, The Angry Young Man of Hollywood. Did that end up costing him work? I mean, did he have that hard to work with label?
Incredibly, not really. No, that is an incredible kind of almost contradiction. You would think that he didn't get that label. He got the nickname television's angry young man, but he really did not have the reputation because for a couple of reasons. One is that people love to work with Rod Serling. In my research for my book, I spent 4 years going through all of Rod Serling's correspondence, letters he wrote, letters he received, all of this stuff, interviews with everybody. And it's impossible to find somebody that didn't get along with Rod Serling. He was a very personable guy. When you were working with him, he had tremendous respect for the people he worked with. So the producers, the other writers that he worked with, the directors, he had tremendous respect for these people. And so they had a real fondness for Rod Serling, and they enjoyed working with him. And I think that even the sponsors, you talk about, say, the people who ran the ad agencies, it's people who would actually come and watch a rehearsal of a show. Well, Rod would bash the interference, but he would never bash them personally. They were still friends with, he was friends with these guys. And he understood that they had a job to do. And he would say, listen, your job is to push a product. I get that. I understand that. My job is to tell a story. So let's work on this. So we both get to do our jobs here, And he was, so he was very, he was just so personable that he never really, had that, and it certainly didn't cost him work. One thing Rod Serling did which was smart and which was, I guess, just kind of made sense, is that he didn't really start making a stink about some of these things until after he had a name for himself. Back in his early days, from 1950 to 1954 or so, you don't find Rod Serling, bemoaning the sponsor interference much on at all, much if not if at all. But after he hit with Patterns was the show that made him an overnight success, and that's literal. That's not hyperbole. Overnight, from it showed one night, the next morning he was a star. He was the most in-demand writer in television, and from that point forward, he said, you know what? There are some things I want to use this medium for, and things I want to say, and I'm not going to shut up anymore. I'm going to say what I have on my mind, let the chips fall where they may.
Tell us about Patterns, that breakthrough series for him.
Patterns was a 1-hour script that Rod wrote for Craft Theater. And it was the story of, that wasn't a controversial show, really. It was a story of a man from Cincinnati, and Rod Serling worked in Cincinnati. So this is somewhat autobiographical. It was a man from Cincinnati who gets a job with a big firm in New York City. So he's going from kind of the small pond to the big pond. And when he gets the job in New York City, he eventually realizes that he's really there to take the place of the current vice president, who was an older man, unwell, and is not performing up to his expectations, and he has to take this guy's job. And it's about the moral dilemma that this guy has been put into, because he likes this guy, he respects the guy, he has affection for this guy, and he doesn't want to push this guy out, but at the same time, he does want the job. He wants the job. He wants to move up the corporate ladder. His wife wants him to move up the corporate ladder. And so it's about that moral dilemma that he has in dealing with a boss who is a slave driver, and the tension between Fred Staples is the character's name, between Fred Staples and Walter Ramsey, the boss of the company, is just so well written. They're so well written. The dialogue between those two characters is so powerful and so cutting that when this show aired, and people would think it's hyperbole now, they think I'm exaggerating or something, but after the show aired, the next morning, the New York Times ran a review of this show and said it was the best thing they'd ever seen on television. In terms of writing, acting, production, direction, it was the high point of the medium to that point, period. So it got unbelievably rave reviews. And like I said, Rod Serling's, one of his famous lines is that the moment that show went off the air, my phone started ringing, and it hasn't stopped since. And he said, like 20 years later, it hasn't stopped since, because that was it. I mean, as soon as that show hit, it was it. And the thing about TV back then, this was live. This was a live performance. So one of the amazing things about Patterns is just the fact that it went off without a hitch. I mean, it was just such a perfect show. It was live, and there's not a single flubbed line, not a single flubbed word. I mean, the direction is perfect. There's no boom mic hanging in the frame somewhere. There's nobody tripping on something. It was just a perfect performance all the way around. And when, with live television back in those days, it was like the opening of a Broadway show. And, just like a Broadway show can open, get terrible reviews, and be gone the next day or within a week, a well-reviewed television show can set somebody up for a long time. And that's what this did for Rod Serling. It gave him those kind of reviews where now he was on top of the world, and he kind of took it from there.
A lot of people used television as a springboard to get into film. I mean, he did write, obviously, he wrote some great film scripts, but he stayed in television. Why didn't he take that leap? Did he love the medium so much?
I think that was definitely part of it. He was asked that question, several times. And part of it was that, he did have an affection for television. It was where he grew up, so to speak, as a writer. It was what he knew, and he was comfortable there. And not only was he comfortable there, but he believed in the power of television. He believed that a medium like this that can enter everybody's living room, and especially in those days, I'm talking about when there was 3 networks or 4 maybe, so you had 60 million people watching one show. He believed that if a medium had that much power to reach that many people at any given time, then it better be better than what it's been. It better educate people. And, he wanted to entertain people always. He always believed in entertaining people. That was first and foremost. But again, he believed that if you had this power, to use a Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility. He had a responsibility. He felt that television had a responsibility. So he stayed with it, with the idea that I'm going to do everything I can to try to get this medium to grow up. And he did. He helped it to grow up tremendously.
Nicholas Parisi is with us. We're talking about the life and times of Rod Serling, of course, the creator of the Twilight Zone. We'll take a quick time out, come back, and discuss further. Don't go away. My trusted sponsor, Get the Tea, is having a sale this month on their Apple Cider Plus and one package of their Life Change Tea. What a great combination, considering it's that time of the year to be laying out on the beach or beside a pool in a few less clothes, right? Apple cider not only helps your digestion along with the tea, but it helps your tummy to feel full, to help us cut down on our intake. And don't we all need some of that? Go to getthetea.com to grab that sale this month. I love their tea. It's an absolute priority for me each and every day. This tea keeps my digestion and gut running smoothly. Just brew, steep, refrigerate, and drink. It's that easy. Iced tea and apple cider plus for the summer. Great combination. Go to getthetea.com. Apply code RICHARDJULY to get free shipping. That's getthetea.com and enter the code RICHARDJULY for free shipping. Guys, we've seen so many people making ridiculous money from crypto, but did you know it's easy for you to do the same? The Copy My Crypto membership site shows you the coins that the YouTuber James McMahon personally holds and allows you to copy him. It's like having a big brother who knows what he's doing. You don't need to know a thing about crypto or how to invest, as you simply do what he does. So let me tell you more about James. He runs the Crypto with James YouTube channel, which, despite heavy censorship, has over 17,000 subscribers and 1 million views. Since March 2020, he's told his viewers to buy 26 crypto coins. Had you put in $100 into each one, it would now be worth over $53,000. Of the 26 coins, his top pick of the year, a coin called Phantom, is currently up over 440 times from when he said to buy. That one call alone has retired a number of people, including guys in their 20s and 30s. Remember, this is public knowledge. You can go to YouTube and verify this for yourself. So if you'd like to join the 1,300 members who copy James, then stop what you're doing and head over to copymycrypto.com/dollar. copymycrypto.com/dollar. That's DOLLAR. You'll not only find proof of everything I've said, but listeners get full access for just $1. You can't find this offer anywhere else, but act fast because the offer ends soon. That's copymycrypto.com/dollar. That's DOLLAR. Don't take this offer lightly. He's the real deal. Go visit the site now.
Welcome back to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Enjoying this conversation immensely with Nicholas Parisi and presenting Serling Fest 2022 in Binghamton, New York, coming up next month in August. And once again, the website for more information
is SerlingFest2022.com.
All right. Will you be? Are you licensed to air like episodes from the series, or?
We have been in the past, but this year actually we're not going to be airing any episodes. We are, as I mentioned, going to be screening 7 days in May on Saturday, and we're going to be airing some rarer stuff outside of the Twilight Zone this year.
All right. Did Serling ever direct?
No, he never did. And sometimes you'll see online the producer, director, writer. No, he never directed anything. He said, I couldn't direct traffic. You know,
Interesting. I mean, because obviously he was a wordsmith and he loved to write. To take that leap of faith and to hand that over to somebody else, to a director, and not, I don't know, he just seemed so, when he's on camera, he seems so earnest. I just find that hard to believe that, you know, he would let that go. That's his baby.
Yeah, well, with the Twilight Zone, I think that he felt that he didn't let it go because he really was so involved with everything. He was so involved with the production, with the casting, with the score, the music, with the editing, everything. He didn't get behind the camera and direct, but he was involved with everything else you could possibly have. And I think he just, again, I think he knew his limitations, and he knew, you know, he was involved with hiring the directors. He would hire the right person, and he would have some control over, you know, the way it came out from all these other aspects, but he never had the desire to actually direct.
When he was writing at Playhouse 90, did he work with Patty Chayefsky?
He knew Patty Chayefsky very well. They never worked together, no, but they were writing certainly right at the same time for the same shows, and they knew each other very well.
That's my favorite movie, Network. Of course, Patty Chayefsky, and that came out, I guess, like the year after Serling died in 70. It came out in 76. I was just trying to imagine if those two had ever gotten together and worked together. I mean, on their
No.
own, they were magnificent, but can you imagine? It's like Tesla and Edison.
Yeah, well, I think the closest you would get actually is Rod did work with Reginald Rose on a script once. Rod never worked with another writer. He was always by himself. But one time he worked with Reginald Rose on a script called The Challenge. It was a pilot for a series. Well, the series really was called The Challenge, and he and Reginald Rose got together and brainstormed a bunch of ideas for it, and they wrote the pilot script together. Rod ended up later saying that Reginald Rose probably wrote 98% of it, but that may have been a little bit of Rod's self-deprecating and not wanting to take credit for it. But that show is available. You can kind of find it was never aired. It was produced. It was never aired, and the show was not picked up, obviously. But that's the one time where he did really collaborate with another writer, and it just happened to be Reginald Rose, which is, I don't know, maybe a half a step below Patty Chayefsky, maybe, if that.
It never aired. I'm wondering if, like, Serling aficionados, Serling fans, did they, like, look for those unreleased gems the way, like, a Beatle fan looks for those rare unreleased tracks?
Well, I certainly did. Yeah. That was part of what spurred the book, was that I started looking for all of these things. I wanted to know what exists. So much of Rod Serling's work, and not just Rod Serling's work, but early television, is gone. I mean, it's lost. The shows that aired live, many of them were not captured. They were not filmed. They were not captured on kinescope. And if they were captured on kinescope, they were thrown away. So a lot of them are gone. So one of the things that really spurred my book was a desire to catalog, all right, what exists, what doesn't exist, what is at some archive somewhere, what is at some music, some television museum somewhere, and what can I actually get, like, on the black market, for lack of a better term, So I searched out for all of those things and got my hands on anything that exists. Yeah.
We talked about whether, he directed. I want to talk about acting, because he once said every writer is a frustrated actor who rehearses his lines in the hidden audition of his skull, or something like that.
Close, yeah, something like that.
Was he a frustrated actor?
I don't think he was a frustrated actor. No, I think, again, I think that was another example of he knew his limitations. I think he would have loved to have been an actor, and he was a ham. I mean, he was a ham. He liked to perform. And he did perform when he was a kid. I mean, he performed. I have clippings of Rod Serling performing at the local Jewish center when he was 6 years old. I mean, he performed in plays from the time he was 6 years old through high school. And after high school, he performed on radio shows. He acted, he did radio acting. He acted in a lot of the shows that he wrote. But he never, again, he was 5'5", and that at that time, Tom Cruise probably wouldn't have made it as a leading man. You had to have some height to you, you had to have some heft to you. So he knew he wasn't going to be a leading man, but he did like to be on camera. He really did. No matter what he said, he liked to be on camera. And so he did some acting after the Twilight Zone, other than just the introductions that he would do on the Twilight Zone. Right.
Is that why he inserted himself as the narrator on camera? Was that his decision, or did he want to do that?
He wanted to do it. Yes. It was a kind of a long story, but the first season of the Twilight Zone, he's not on camera. He's off camera. He does the introductions off camera. And the second season, they wanted to add an on-camera narrator. They thought it might, juice things up a little bit, maybe get the ratings up a little bit. So they were going to go get Orson Welles. And the long story short is, Rod said, I'll do it. And they let Rod do it. and again, it was his baby. So he really did. If he said he was going to do it, they were going to let him do it. And, the rest is history. He was who could be better at introducing Twilight Zone episodes? Nobody.
All right, back to more of our conversation. Nicholas Parisi talking about Rod Serling, his life, his work, his imagination, the Twilight Zone. Stay with us.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. If you administer insulin 3 or more times per day, or use an insulin pump, call now and learn how a CGM can help you.
Painless. No more pricking my finger.
No finger pricks.
Convenience. They delivered it free and they took care of all the paperwork.
You can reduce pain right away. Plus, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you spend more time in range. And if you have insurance, you can get a new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. Call now and get free shipping of your new CGM. Plus, we'll bill your insurance for you. 800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. That's 800-817-2974.
The truth will set you free. But first, it will really tick you off. Welcome back to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Nicholas Parisi is here with us for the full 2 hours, and we're talking about Rod Serling, of course, and the Twilight Zone, and Serling Fest 2022 coming your way in Binghamton, New York in August. SerlingFest.com?
SerlingFest2022.com.
SerlingFest2022.com. All right. Well, you mentioned Orson Welles. I wasn't sure if that was an apocryphal story or not, that Orson Welles was originally slated to be the narrator. So they gave it some consideration?
Yes, I think the misconception on the Orson Welles things is what you said, is that he was never the original choice for narrator. There's been some discrepancies about that they originally wanted Orson Welles. What they originally, if you watch, on the DVD collections, the Blu-ray collections, there is a demo version of the pilot episode, Where Is Everybody, that has a different announcer doing the introduction and the Twilight Zone theme, the beginning introduction. That was Jason I forget the guy's name, Van Voorhees. I forget his full name, but so there was a different announcer for that, and then Rod took over from him. And it was just after the first season was done that they decided, maybe we should have somebody on camera. And the first name they thought of was Orson Welles. And they said, and Rod actually, Rod was scheduled to fly to London to meet with Orson Welles. And I never was able to determine if he actually did follow through with that. But shortly afterward, he got the job, So I think, like I said, I think he kind of objected to a certain extent. He probably had a good standing to object, because Orson Welles would have wanted too much money. I mean, and by too much money, I mean any money, because they were already trying to cut the budget in every way they possibly could. They couldn't afford to go hire Orson Welles to be the narrator. So Rod came at the right price. So
right.
So he got the job.
Well, we'll talk about the penny pinching in a moment, but if that meeting had taken place, I don't know, I'm imagining, the Savoy Hotel or something. Boy, would I like to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation.
No doubt.
The meeting of those two minds. I'm sure Rod Serling must have been listening to the Mercury Theater back in '38 with the War of the Worlds that night. Did he ever mention that?
I don't think he ever mentioned it, but yeah, I can't imagine he wasn't. Yeah.
So the budgeting for the Twilight Zone, penny pinching, I guess, to say the least. They had to salvage props from elsewhere. Tell me about that.
Well, they reused props from themselves. I mean, so you'll see certain things throughout the series reused in various episodes, certain props. And they would get certain props from the MGM lot. There would be they used the spaceship from Forbidden Planet. I mean, they would do that when they had to. And again, I think one of the amazing things about the Twilight Zone is that nobody really cares about that. Nobody cares that the aliens looked crummy. Nobody cares that the spaceship, you saw the wires on it. I think watching the Twilight Zone, that just wasn't the focus. That wasn't what was important. It was nice. I mean, every now and then, listen, Twilight Zone did some really cutting edge stuff for the time, for 1959, 1960. When you're talking about things like Eye of the Beholder. The direction of Eye of the Beholder, where you have to go through a half an hour without seeing anyone's face, and the way they used shadows. And I mean, the directing job by Douglas Hayes in that episode is just tremendous. I think it was Douglas Hayes. I hope I got that right. But things like that, or The Howling Man, another one I think of, where it's just, they made the most of these, unusual sets. You would see things like an episode like The Obsolete Man, where they have a doorway that's about 25 feet tall. And Burgess Meredith goes through this doorway that's 25 feet tall, and he goes to a table that's like 25 feet long a podium that Fritz Weaver is standing behind that's about 25 feet tall. I mean, it was just this. They used the settings, they used the those kind of things to such great effect that they didn't need $1 million budget for special effects. They got it done.
So five seasons.
Yes.
It was always in black and white, right? They never.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Was there ever a consideration? I mean, for shooting in color?
Not during those 5 seasons. No. After the show ended, Rod wanted the Twilight Zone to continue. As much as he said he was burnt out and he was tired of it and everything else, I believe if somebody had come to him and said, "Yeah, we want to do another season of the show," he would have done it. And I do have some correspondence from him in the '60s saying, "Hey, what about this? What about an hour-long Twilight Zone show in color? Why can't we do this?" And he wanted to bring it back, and he would have, if he had brought it back, it would have been in color. It would have been akin to Night Gallery.
They didn't. Was it originally a 30 and it moved to an hour, or was it an hour and they moved it to a 30?
No, it was originally a 30. It was a 30 for 3 seasons, and then it came back mid-season the next season at an hour length. They did 18 one-hour episodes, and then it came back for a full season of half-hour shows for a 5th season.
So was the feeling then that the hour-long just didn't work?
Pretty much, yeah. The hour-long are pretty universally seen as not as good as the half-hour shows. And I think Rod wanted the show to be an hour long to begin with. It was originally proposed as an hour-long show, and it took some doing to get him to agree to make it a half an hour. And so he never quite got that idea out of his head. So when they proposed to do it an hour in the 4th season, he was all for it. It wasn't like it was against his will. He wanted to do it as an hour, and it just didn't quite go the way he wanted it to go. And so he didn't object when they said, "Let's go back to a half hour." He knew that was a better format for the show.
And how were the ratings, like from the season 1 right through to the end?
They were never great, but they were never terrible. They were always just kind of borderline and enough to get the show renewed. Occasionally, it had some episodes that were very highly rated. It had some good promotion behind certain episodes and everything. So occasionally the ratings would spike, but they were never great. But they were good enough to renew, and it also had the prestige, and it had Rod Serling, and he really was the biggest name as far as writers go in television at the time. So they were willing to go with this show when it was decent ratings and had some prestige to it. They were willing to keep it going.
The theme song. We have to talk about the theme song. And those, do, 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 do. You need 3 notes. It's worldwide. It's one of the great brands, dare I say, in the history of marketing, like right up there with Coca-Cola or I don't know, CNN once upon a time. It's become such a touchstone, but they never used that in the 1st season, did they? Did that come in later?
That didn't come in until the 4th season, actually.
The 4th season?
Well, the 4th season, I should check myself, because I'm thinking the music and the actual visual of the door and the eyeball and the window and everything, that was 4th season. That came in the 4th season, and that was with the do 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 theme song. But the do 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 may have actually also been in the 3rd season. They just changed the visual, so I think it was the 3rd season actually. But the original, the first 2 seasons, certainly the 1st season, was the much more dramatic, so to speak, and ethereal, much more ethereal music with "There is a 5th dimension beyond that which is known to man," and you kind of see the gauzy, filter going across the screen. This dimension is vast as space, and this time is infinity. So that was the original, yeah. But the doo-doo is the one that's stuck in everybody's brain and stuck in the popular culture forever. You just say those, like you said, 4 notes, and you know exactly what you're talking about.
Do we know the origin of that song? Who wrote it and how it came out? How it came out?
It was Bernard Herrmann, I believe, was Mary's Constant and Bernard Herrmann were the 2 main ones who wrote the 2 themes for the Twilight Zone, and I believe that one was Bernard Herrmann. And I don't know the story behind how he actually came up with that, but it was a stroke of genius apparently, because it's just immediately recognizable.
Yeah, what I want to know is the estate still receiving royalties for that?
For the song, for the theme?
Yeah.
That I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it was, a work for hire, as they say, so he likely didn't get full ownership of the music. I'm sure about that, but hopefully he got a little something. Yeah, I'm hoping he got a little something out of it.
All right, we are approaching the top of the hour, and We'll get ready, settle in for hour 2. Nicholas Parisi, my guest. We're talking about the life and work and imagination of Rod Serling. Don't forget, Serling Fest 2022 coming to Binghamton, New York in August. SerlingFest2022.com, the website. All right, hold tight. We'll be back with more right after these. If you're a fan of this radio program and the Strange Planet podcast, why not show it off by wearing Strange Planet apparel or drinking from a Strange Planet mug? Check out all the great Strange Planet merch in my Strange Planet shop. Just go to the website, strangeplanet.ca, and click on Shop in the menu. There's a huge selection of men's and women's t-shirts. You like crop circles or the Mayan calendar? Got you covered. Are you into the Anunnaki? Wait till you see these designs. My favorite right now, lions do not lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. And one of our best sellers right now, Truth Gets You Crucified on the front and a passage from Matthew chapter 23 on the back. So many great t-shirt designs, I don't know where to begin. There's women's leggings and tote bags and, of course, mugs. Great gifts for family and friends who listen and love this show. My Strange Planet shop. Visit today and often. Just go to strangeplanet.ca and check it out. Have you subscribed to my newsletter yet? It's fast, easy, and absolutely free. Just go to my website, strangeplanet.ca, and then click on subscribe. All I need is your email address, and that's it. Then, once a month, you'll receive my newsletter, Inner Sanctum, in your email inbox. The Inner Sanctum contains a monthly brief, a column of my analysis of the news and opinions. There's a This Month in UFO or Conspiracy History, a look ahead to an upcoming episode of this radio program, a book club, my podcast pick of the month, a spotlight on a previous guest, and much more. Join the Strange Planet community by signing up for your free subscription to Inner Sanctum. Again, go to strangeplanet.ca, and click on subscribe. It's a strange planet. Read all about it.
Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
Thanks for inviting me into your home. Your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed basement with the simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Carlos Cagina is our technical producer. Ryan White is our live stream producer. Please check out the YouTube and Rumble channels, Strange Planet. Nicholas Parisi is with us, and we are celebrating the legacy of Rod Serling, and Nicholas serves on the board of directors for the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to preserving and promoting Rod's legacy. He's a former staff writer, editor for Good Times Magazine on Long Island, and again, the author of Rod Serling, His Life, Work, and Imagination, with a foreword by Rod's daughter, Anne Serling. So, how did you get to meet Anne?
I first met Anne when she was doing a reading for her book, As I Knew Him, My Dad, Rod Serling. And she was doing an appearance for that. And I was working on my book at the time. And I had written an outline of my book, and a pretty detailed outline of my book. And I brought it to her. I met her and her husband, and I brought it to her, and I said, hey, this is what I'm working on, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. And I gave it to her. And she called me the next day and said, this is wonderful. This is tremendous. I hope you do this. Please do this. Please finish this. It's exactly what's needed, because again, the one thing about my book is that it's the first book that covers Rod Serling's entire career, from show number 1 to show number end, and it covers them in a way that other books have not covered them, in a show by show, series by series basis. So I think she was very intrigued by the idea that there would finally be a record, an official record of here's Rod Serling's body of work. Bam, that's it. This is it. So she encouraged me, and she was instrumental in just, when you get the endorsement of the man's daughter, you're gonna do what she says, So I went and finished the book, and she was kind enough to offer to write the foreword for me. So, and we've been friends ever since. And that's and I always have to give credit to her book, because her book, As I Knew Him, My Dad, Rod Serling, is just a beautiful memoir. It's the book that if you feel like there's any part of Rod Serling that you don't know about, get her book. Get her book instead of mine. And read that, because you'll get a picture of the man that you had not had before, of the father, the human being. In her book, it's really a tremendous piece of work.
Well, I've not read it, but was he like an attentive dad? Because it seemed to be so wrapped up in his work. I imagine him as just like a workaholic. Was he an attentive dad?
Yeah, I think he was cloned. At some point he was cloned, because there had to be 2 or 3 Rod Serlings running around at some point, because I don't know how he was able to accomplish all the things that he did. But seriously, the amazing thing about Anne's recollections in Anne's book is the fact that, yes, he wasn't necessarily, let's put it this way. She says that she and her sister Jody never felt like they were without Dad. They always felt that he was there, and he was approachable. He had his office, on the grounds. He had his office next to the pool, at the house. And when they would come to New York, when they would come to Ithaca, and they had their lake house, he would be working on the boat. He dictated, so he would be dictating on the boat, but he was there, so they always felt that he was approachable and accessible. So no matter how much work he was doing, and it was a tremendous amount of work that he did. So that is one amazing thing that you'll get from her book, is how was he able to do this? I'm not real sure.
So if I'm remembering correctly, he wrote 92 out of the 156 episodes over 5 seasons. There's prolific, right, and then there's like Rod Serling. How did he work? Do you have a sense of how he wrote and his working habits?
Yeah, well, the first thing, like I said, is that very unusual for a writer. He dictated all of his scripts. He dictated everything. He started out like everybody does. He started out by typing in the 1950 to say 1954. He would type just like two fingers, hunt and peck. But right around 1955, he started to dictate his scripts, because he felt that his mind was working too fast for his fingers, and he couldn't type fast enough, and he wanted to just get it out. So he started to dictate. And his process was, he would dictate the script pretty much straight through, give it to his secretary to type up, and she would give him back the printed copy, and then he would go through it and line edit it. He would go back and he'd go and make notes, and then he would dictate the edits. So he would dictate Marge, there's a secretary's name is Marge, page 3 here, let's take it from here, and he would dictate the changes, and he would go through it, and then she would give him the next draft, and that would usually probably be it. So, and he would work generally, morning until lunchtime, take that long lunch break, and then work a couple hours after lunch, and that was pretty much it. Or during Twilight Zone days, he would he'd work in the morning, then go to the studio, and he'd be at the studio, for till nighttime, and then come home afterward, So he would put the Twilight Zone to bed every day, but yeah, so he worked and worked and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. It's amazing the amount of stuff that he wrote in a short lifetime.
How did he write dialogue so well? I met Richard Matheson Jr. I interviewed him, and his dad, great writer as well. One of the core 4, as we'll discuss. But
yeah.
And he talked about, to be a great writer of dialogue, you have to be a great listener.
Yeah.
How did Rod master writing dialogue?
I think that is the essence right there. You have to be a listener, and Rod Serling was, I mentioned before that he was a very personable guy, and he got along with pretty much everybody, and he had a lot of friends. And I think one of the things that endeared Rod Serling to people was that he was interested in people. He really, if you talk, I was 5 years old when the man died, so I never met Rod Serling. I wish I could have met Rod Serling. I feel like I met Rod Serling sometimes, but if you listen to the people who knew Rod Serling or took his classes, because he taught for a long time, or just interacted with him, they would say that, when you talk to Rod Serling, he looked you in the eye and he listened to what you said, and how amazing that, he was never the Hollywood, the Hollywood personality that, oh yeah, looking at his watch and saying, hey, nice to meet you, I got to get out of here. If you want something to talk to Rod Serling about, he would sit there and listen to you. So yes, he listened to the way people spoke, and he translated that into his work. And he had a great ear for dialogue. It was certainly his biggest strength as a writer.
Right. Would he also script out the stage direction or the?
Often he would. Yes. In the Twilight Zone, certainly he would script out the camera angles and things like that, close up, for medium shot, that kind of stuff. He would script that out. And pretty much the same throughout his career. I don't think he ever really strayed away from that. I mean, he might have cut down on it a little bit later in his career, but not much. He would include that stuff.
Was he always a chain smoker?
Yeah, I think probably from the time he joined the Army. Yeah, I don't know if he smoked before that. He probably did, but I think the Army was where it really kicked in, and who knows how much he smoked. It was just it was constant.
So we mentioned Richard Matheson. So there was what you call the core four group of writers. Serling, who wrote the bulk, 92 out of 156 episodes. We mentioned Richard Matheson. Who were the other in the core four?
Charles Beaumont would be the next one for sure, and George Clayton Johnson is the one that I would include in that four. George Clayton Johnson wrote "Kick the Can," "A Game of Pool," "Nothing in the Dark" with Robert Redford. He wrote some real classic episodes. George Clayton Johnson. I think Earl Hamner Jr. wrote more episodes than George Clayton Johnson, but George Clayton Johnson wrote better episodes by far. I mean, not to bag on Earl Hamner, but he was not quite the right writer for the Twilight Zone. His episodes were pretty forgettable. But those were the four, and I wish I knew the numbers on what each of them wrote. But between Rod and those three writers, so in those four, I believe they wrote, I think it was like 130 out of the 156. So I think there were only like 26 episodes written by other people than those four writers.
So, as an expert on Rod Serling, if you didn't know who wrote what episode, and you didn't look at the end credits, would you be able to tell? Oh, that's a Charles Beaumont, or that's a George Clayton Johnson, or no, that's a Serling.
Yes, yeah, I could certainly tell. If I'm trying to think about. Well, I'll tell you one. I actually did get fooled by one. Not too long. How long ago would it? It'd be probably about maybe 15 years ago. I was watching, and one of my favorite episodes, probably top 20, is an episode called. It's an underrated episode called "The Trouble with Templeton." It's an episode about an aging actor who wants to go back in time to when he was younger and his glory days on the stage. And he goes back in time, and his friends realize that he's come back in time, including his girlfriend, and they push him out. They say, "You don't belong here. You need to go back to your own time." And there's a scene in this episode that is just so beautiful where the woman, his girlfriend, has to play this part. She has to act like she doesn't want him there because she knows it's better for him to be in the present. He shouldn't be in the past. And she pushes him out. And the moment he leaves, you see the emotion just come over her face. Like, what did I had to do something I didn't want to do. And when I watched that episode like 15 years ago, I thought it was Serling. I thought for sure it was Serling. And it turned out it was a man named E. Jack Newman. It was the only episode he ever wrote for the show. And I was shocked when I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe that wasn't a Serling." But one thing you will find, I think, is that E. Jack Newman in that episode, and there were a couple of times George Clayton Johnson where I think that George Clayton Johnson was emulating Rod Serling just to a certain extent. So I think that in his episodes, there's sometimes where I feel like it's an extension of Rod Serling. He kind of emulated him a little bit. But Beaumont and Matheson, they have very, very distinctive styles. They stood out like a sore thumb.
And who decided on the core four? Was it the producers? Did Serling have input?
It was mainly Serling and Chuck Beaumont. Chuck Beaumont was the I'm sorry, not Chuck Beaumont. I'm sorry, Buck Houghton. Buck Houghton was the producer for the first three seasons of the Twilight Zone, and Serling and Buck Houghton were a great team. They really worked well together, and they had a real similar vision for the show. And so Rod met Beaumont and Matheson right off the bat when he screened the pilot, and they were recommended to him by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury recommended these guys, and along with George Clayton Johnson. And so they were at the screening of the pilot, and they kind of, they met Serling, and Rod invited them to submit their scripts. And I think it was just serendipity. It was just what an amazing bolt of luck, because they were so perfect. They were just perfect for the show. And and Rod just accepted their scripts, never edited them, never changed a word. I mean, he just almost took them exactly as they were and aired them. I mean, that was how well they worked together.
He never rewrote. Did he have that power? Could he have?
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Rod Serling. I mean, he owned half the show. He owned half the interest in the films. And like I said, he was the executive producer. He was, so he had the power to do pretty much anything. And Charles Beaumont wrote a very famous article right at the beginning of the series for the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction about how when he gave his first script to Serling, it was a script called Perchance to Dream. Great episode about a man who thinks he's having a recurring nightmare, and he has a heart condition, and he thinks he's going to die in his sleep because he can't handle this nightmare. And he says, when I gave this script to Serling, I figured, all right, it's going to be chopped up, it's going to be edited. I understand this is television, and even though Rod told me, don't worry about the little old lady in Dubuque. She'll get it. She'll understand it. Don't worry about it. Just write for yourself. Write it the way you want it to be. And Charles Beaumont said, when it aired, I was amazed that not a word had been changed, not a line. He was amazed. And so that kind of thing endeared writers to Rod Serling, because they knew this guy's going to respect my work. And if he was going to change something, he'd call me and say, hey, Chuck, maybe we should work on this or something. He wasn't just going to take a pencil and change a line, So yeah, that was, so most of the time, Beaumont and Matheson, their scripts were aired untouched.
True or false? They accepted scripts from viewers.
True and false. At the very beginning, Rod had this brilliant idea that we'll open up floodgates, let viewers send in their scripts, send in their ideas, and see what comes in. And he said, they got like 500 scripts, and like one of them was even remotely passable. So he stopped that practice pretty much right away. So none of those scripts ever aired, and he regretted that decision pretty quick.
Yeah, give those to the Outer Limits.
Yeah.
Was there kind of a friendly competition with similar shows?
Well, Outer Limits came after the Twilight Zone. So there wasn't. I do know that Serling enjoyed the Outer Limits. He enjoyed Joseph Steranko was the main writer and creator of the Outer Limits, and he admired him. He thought he did good work and everything. But no, so there was never really any competition or anything. One Step Beyond actually came before the Twilight Zone, so that had a little bit of an overlap with the Twilight Zone. But again, Twilight Zone was not. It was unique. It wasn't either of those shows. It was its own thing, really.
Charles Beaumont, he was the one that died quite young. I think it was. Yes. He was only, I don't know, maybe 40, but he looked maybe twice that age. What happened to Charles Beaumont?
He was stricken with a rare brain disease, a brain disorder that is akin to Alzheimer's disease, akin to early onset Alzheimer's disease. And he was like 35, I believe, when he contracted it. And he aged incredibly quick to the point where when he died, he looked like he was 70 years old. And when he first started experiencing the symptoms of it, people thought he was a drunk. People thought that he was they thought he was a drinker because he appeared drunk. He would slur his words. He couldn't quite think as clearly as he used to. And several of the Twilight Zone scripts that were credited to Charles Beaumont later in the show were not written by Charles Beaumont. He would farm out his work because he just couldn't handle it anymore. He couldn't do it. He had ideas, and maybe it was based on his short story, but other people like John Tomerlin would write his scripts and ghostwrite them. And they did it out of friendship to him. They didn't get credit. They got paid, but they didn't get credit. And they did it because they knew what he was going through, and they wanted to help. And he had so many writing assignments that he just couldn't handle them. So it's a tragic story. Charles Beaumont was a brilliant writer. I mean, just a brilliant writer. He wrote novels, he wrote short stories, he wrote some of the greatest Twilight Zone episodes. The Howling Man is one of my favorites. Shadow Play is another of my favorites, both Charles Beaumont stories. And and he died way, way, way too young.
I'm wondering what it was like on the set. I was on YouTube recently, and I saw Clint Howard, Ron Howard's brother, reminiscing about life on the Andy Griffith Show, Andy of Mayberry, and it was like such a family on screen and off screen, and they had all of these home movies, behind the scenes. Was there anything comparable like that on the Twilight Zone set?
I don't think so, and you could imagine why, because there weren't any continuing characters on the Twilight Zone, so it wasn't like they had a chance to really bond over the course of a season or whatever. But Rod Serling and Charles Beaumont certainly had that kind of friendship. And I keep saying Charles Beaumont, I mean Buck Houghton. Rod Serling and Buck Houghton had that kind of relationship. They were close friends and everything. And so there was that, and with the other writers, I should say Charles Beaumont, because they were all very good friends. Charles Beaumont, Richard Matheson, and Serling, and George Clayton Johnson, they were all very close. So that kind of thing, but there was, no continuing characters that could kind of develop that kind of relationship.
Right, but did Anne Serling spend any time on the set?
I believe she talks about one time being on the set when she was very young. Anne was born in, I'm going to probably date her. Well, let's put it this way. I think she was only like 5 years old when the show was on. So she was very young. And she remembers being on the set and just remembering like a stairway that went to nowhere and thinking it was so weird, like where these stairs go and it just ends, like that kind of thing. But no, nothing, no real stories about like antics on the set or anything like that.
So we think of the Twilight Zone primarily as science fiction and fantasy, but occasionally the show would break format. There's an episode with Carol Burnett and Jesse White, who I remember he's the original Maytag repairman, but that's not fair. He did so much more than that. But as a kid, I remember Jesse White as the Maytag repairman, and that was just an out-and-out comedy. Were there
they actually did several comedies, and the one of the big ironies of Rod Serling's life, actually, or as a writer anyway, his writing life, is that Rod Serling loved comedy. And, you think of Rod Serling as being this dour, scary kind of guy and everything. Rod Serling was a cut-up. Rod Serling loved comedy. He did impressions. He was a student of comedy. He would go watch, Milton Berle or watch Red Skelton and just to absorb it, and so he always wanted to write comedy. It never quite came through, certainly not in the Twilight Zone. The episode with Carol Burnett, I don't particularly like that one, but it's a memorable one for her, I think. Because she's in it, I mean, and so there was that one. There was there's a few other comedies that mainly I'm trying to think if anybody else wrote a comedy. I think mainly was just Rod, like an episode like Mr. Beavis is the kind of the companion piece to Cavender is Coming, is the episode with Carol Burnett. Mr. Beavis is about a guy who has a guardian angel. He's kind of a weird kind of a goofball kind of guy, and he was always getting into trouble at work because he's just he's a goofball, that kind of thing, and that was a kind of lighthearted comedy, and I like that one better than Cavender, actually. And there's a couple others. Showdown with Rance McGrew, about a Western guy guy acts in a Western, and Jesse James comes back from the dead to tell him that he's given him a bad name because they're portraying all these characters in the wrong way, and wants to like rewrite the show because I thought there's some laughs in that one, but Rod's comedies never they never quite made it, and at least as well as the other ones did, obviously.
Well, they say that's the hardest thing to do, right? Is comedy.
Yeah.
All right, another time out awaits. Nicholas Parisi stays with us as we continue to pay tribute to the legacy of Rod Serling. Don't go away. I call it the miracle molecule, carbon-60 or C60, for my good friends at C60evo.com. And I take a tablespoon every morning. It delivers more than 172 times the power of vitamin C. C60 is a known antiviral, antioxidant, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. It's a remedy that works. C60 Evo users consistently enjoy better sleep and wake up feeling refreshed. This alone is worth the cost of the bottle. I sleep like a baby. I have no aches or pains, zero. I'm 58 and I don't have a gray hair on my head. Get your miracle in a bottle, C60, from c60evo.com/Richard-Syrett. c60evo.com/Richard-Syrett. Use the coupon code EVRS at checkout and save an additional 10%. This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. If you have a medical concern, please contact your healthcare provider. You can become an official Patreon supporter of my work here at Strange Planet Productions by donating a monthly amount through patreon.com/Strange Planet. Patreon.com/Strange Planet. There are several tiers to choose from. Pick which one is right for you, but any monthly amount is greatly appreciated. As a sign of my appreciation, you can have your name mentioned on air during my weekly radio show, or you could have your name included in a crawl on my YouTube channel live stream. You could also receive episodes of my old podcast, The Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. This critically acclaimed podcast, produced in partnership with Chris Jericho, is not currently available anywhere else. If you enjoy this podcast or my weekly radio program, The Conspiracy Show, you can really get behind me and my work by donating once a month at patreon.com/Strange Planet. Patreon.com/Strange Planet.
It's time to redefine reality. This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
So, 156 episodes, 5 seasons. What was the shooting schedule like for the Twilight Zone?
They shot most episodes in 3 days. Yeah, I mean, if they got a rehearsal on the first day, maybe, and then 2 days more. I mean, so it was each episode was done pretty much 3 days.
Wow. Did they do a table read?
I don't know. I think they probably occasionally did. Yeah, I think probably they did a table read more often than they did a full blown rehearsal. I would think, just because of the time constraints. I would think, but I don't know that for sure.
And was it like a one camera shoot and they would block it out, or was it like 3 cameras, or?
There were multiple cameras, but I couldn't tell you the specifics. That's something I did not get into, the technical stuff about the production of the show.
So we were talking about Cavender is Calling and some of the other episodes that broke with the format. There's another episode that sort of broke the format, The Silence, because there's no elements of supernatural or sci-fi at all. It's just like a drama, almost like a psychological thriller even. So tell me about The Silence for those who haven't seen it. You write about it a lot in your book.
Yeah, I was going to say I love The Silence, and I did not intend this. This was not a purposeful thing, but when I was writing my book, I found that I wrote more about The Silence than I did about any other Twilight Zone episode, and it was just because I found that I had more to say about it for whatever reason. And The Silence is somewhat polarizing because, as you said, it doesn't have any science fiction or supernatural aspect to it, and some people, fellow Twilight Zone fans I know, don't like it for that reason. They think it could have been an episode of Alfred Hitchcock, and so why it's not really a Twilight Zone. So. But I don't see it that way. I just see it as a great piece of TV. I don't really care. It was a Twilight Zone. It was aired on the Twilight Zone. So for me, it's a great piece of TV, and it's a Twilight Zone, so it's a great Twilight Zone. I don't really care if it was, in the realm of something else. But The Silence is, again, for those who don't know, it's about a boar, set in a gentleman's club. It's a gentleman's club, all wealthy, to-do people. And this one particular member of the club just can't shut up. I mean, he just comes to the club and just yaps and yaps and yaps. And there's one character that really just can't stand it anymore. The rest of the people who are there kind of deal with it, and they deal with it. But this guy just can't handle it. And he finally bets the man $500,000 that he can't stay quiet for a year. And the bet is that to prove that he's going to be quiet for a year, they're going to put him in a booth where they can observe him at every moment of the day. He'll be there. He'll have everything he needs, like food and water and TV and books and whatever else he needs, but he can't speak. And the episode builds the tension. Can this guy make it through the year? And as the time goes on, the man who made the bet with him is. First, he's pleading with him to cut the bet. I'll give you $15,000 if you get out now. Just we'll cut it now. And we'll call it even. And the guy won't take the bait. And then he finally starts trying to bait the guy into saying something by spreading rumors about his wife. Hey, I saw your wife out. And then, and hoping that will do it, and that won't do it. And he finally makes it through the year without speaking. And he comes out to collect. And it turns out the guy who made the bet never had the money. He was a member of the club, but he had used up his fortune years and years ago. He was destitute. He had no money, and he couldn't pay the guy. And then that's the first twist. And this is one of a couple episodes that have kind of a double twist. The second twist is that the reason this guy was able to do the year without speaking is that before he went in there, he had surgery done, and he has vocal cords cut, and he shows you the scar on his neck where he had the vocal cords cut. So it's what I found, and the reason I wrote so much about it in the book, was that it's such a brilliant piece of writing. I think I'm using that word brilliant a lot, but it's kind of the best word for this. It's such an amazing piece of writing on Serling's point, in the fact that in 30 minutes, and not even 30 minutes because commercials, 24 minutes, he takes your sympathies, and they start with this guy who's making the bet, because this other guy is really a bore. He's a pain in the butt, and he's, you want this guy to shut up. So your sympathies are with the guy who's making the bet. Yeah, get this guy to shut up. And then gradually your sympathies go to the other guy, because this guy is now shit turning. He's starting to spread rumors and say things he shouldn't say. And so your sympathy is turning to him. And then when the guy comes out and this guy says, I don't have the money. Well, you would think, all right, now he's clearly the villain here. He made this bet and didn't have the money, but he's sincere. He tells this guy, listen, I would have begged on the street. I would have begged on the street if I could have got you the money. I would have done anything. I wanted to get you out of there early. I couldn't do it. And I'm a fraud. And he tells the whole club, I'm a fraud. I don't deserve to be here. I'm going to resign my membership immediately. And he's repentant. I mean, so you now all of a sudden, whoa, wait a second. Now your sympathies are going the other way. And then this guy says, I cheated. I cut my vocal cords. I would never have been able to spend a year being silent. I had to go to extreme means to be silent. So you sympathize with him. Oh man, he cut his vocal cords. Wow, that's terrible. But at the same time, he cheated. He knew he couldn't do it. And so it's this moral dilemma of back and forth. And neither of the characters are to blame completely or to like completely. And Serling's, the way he develops that episode is just amazing. I think that's, if you talk about, writing classes, you want a writing class, take that script and teach that to somebody, because it starts with the economy of language. That's the economy of language that Rod Serling was able to do, particularly in that episode, is incredible. I mean, he starts with the very first scene in the show is the boar talking his head off at these other people. And he's saying things like, I was talking to so-and-so today, and he gives you the name. I was talking to so-and-so, and he says he would do this and do that. And that name that he's dropped is a name drop. It's a fictional name. It's a mythical name. It doesn't mean anything to us watching the show, but it's a name drop. The other people saying, oh God, now he's telling us how he's friends with the mayor again, that kind of thing. And it's in 2 lines, you get the total sense of this character. You get the total sense of the character and the dynamic between him and the rest of the club in like 2 minutes of dialogue, if that, 2 minutes of dialogue. And then same thing with the other character, where the character who makes the bet is sitting there with the other guy saying, "Do you believe this guy? He's going on and he's gritting his teeth and saying," and it's just it's an amazing bit of characterization in dialogue. He's talking about how great Serling was with dialogue. Well, this was dialogue that established characteristics in every word. Not a word is wasted in that episode, and it's a clinic. It's a television writing clinic.
You mentioned the 2 twists there. There's a third one, which is not known necessarily to people watching the episode, but it has to do with this interesting backstory about the loudmouth boar. Do you know what I'm referring to?
His wife, you're talking about, or
no, he gets in a bar fight.
The backstory. Yes. Well, that's actually the guy who makes the bet.
It's the guy that makes the bet.
Yeah. I forget his actor's name. Franco Tone, very good actor. Yeah, he got into a bar fight while the episode was filming. And so if you watch it now and watch particularly for the scenes where he is talking to the character in the booth, in the silent booth. When he's talking to him, he has his face pressed up against the glass, so you can only see one side of his face, because the other side of his face was mangled from getting beat up. And you would never know that from watching it. But now if watch it, you'll notice they never show that the left side of his face from a certain point forward in the episode.
Oh, it's amazing. While you were telling that story, I watched. I had this deluxe edition of Network, which I mentioned earlier because it's my favorite film, and it's the little extras, you get the bonus material. So you have Sidney Lumet doing the commentary, while the movie's playing, and you learn all of these amazing, backstories. And in this scene it was raining, so when Howard Beale is walking through the streets of New York, it wasn't raining, so we had to, we brought in the rain machine and all of this stuff. How cool would it have been? Because, Serling died in 1975, but to have him available to do the commentaries on all of those episodes.
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing is that there is some Serling commentary on some episodes in some of the DVD releases and the Blu-ray, because Rod taught for a long time, and in teaching, he would very often use his own work as examples of things. So they were able to take some of Rod's teaching audio and put it to the episodes. For example, a walking distance, during a walking distance in Twilight Zone, you have Rod Serling talking about, what he was thinking when he wrote, this scene or whatever, and talking about Gig Young's performance in the episode and things like that. And there's a bunch like that, actually, that because he brought up his own work, a lot as examples of what to do and what not to do, usually what not to do, again, because Rod was such a critic of his own work. So yeah, you do actually have that on a handful of episodes at least.
Oh, very cool. Where did he teach writing?
He taught at Ithaca College for several years, from around the late 60s until he died in 75, really mid 60s until 75. And he taught at Antioch College. Actually, after we talked about, there were 3 seasons of the Twilight Zone at a half an hour, and then it was 1 hour. Well, in between the 3rd and 4th season, Rod Serling decided he was going to take a break, and he went back to Yellow Springs, Ohio, where he went to college. He went to Antioch, and he taught. So he taught several classes at Antioch in the interim between the 3rd and 4th season of the Twilight Zone, and actually even during the 4th season of the Twilight Zone. And that's one reason why he wasn't quite as involved with the Twilight Zone as much in the 4th and 5th seasons as he had been previously. But so he taught there, and he loved teaching. He loved interacting with the students. It was something he was good at, and yeah, he really enjoyed it.
Wow. Can you imagine taking a writing course from Rod Serling and maybe having one of your short stories with his comments written on the margins? That's something you would frame. All right, we'll take another time out. Nicholas Parisi is with us. We'll continue to delve into the life, career, imagination of Rod Serling, and we'll talk about some specific Twilight Zone episodes, sure to be on most people's top 10 list. Back with more of our discussion right after this.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. If you administer insulin 3 or more times per day or use an insulin pump, call now and learn how a CGM can help you.
Painless. No more pricking my finger.
No finger pricks.
Convenience. They delivered it free and they took care of all the paperwork.
You can reduce pain right away. Plus, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you spend more time in range. And if you have insurance, you can get a new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. Call now and get free shipping of your new CGM. Plus, we'll bill your insurance for you. 800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. That's 800-817-2974.
The truth will set you free. But first, it will really tick you off. Welcome back to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Nicholas Parisi is presenting Serling Fest 2022. Again, give us the details, Nicholas.
It's August 12th, 13th, and 14th in Binghamton, New York. And details can be found at serlingfest2022.com. And one thing I haven't mentioned is that one of the main things that we are raising funds for at Serling Fest this year is to get a statue of Rod Serling built and installed in Recreation Park in Binghamton. And this is the park that Rod Serling played in when he was a kid. It is the park that inspired Walking Distance, maybe my favorite Twilight Zone episode. And it's the most appropriate place that a Rod Serling statue can be. So we're going to be making some announcements at Serling Fest about that, and this is going to be a big fundraiser for us to get that done.
Fantastic. All right, so let's talk about a favorite episode of many people. It's probably on most people's top 10 list, maybe top 20. Burgess Meredith and his most famous episode, Time Enough at Last. Tell listeners who don't know about the episode, give us a little summary, and we'll talk about that one.
Yeah, Time Enough at Last was written by Rod Serling, based on a short story by Lynn Venable, a woman who I don't think published more than half a dozen short stories in her life, I think, but this was one of them. I don't think she published many more. But and you know what? I shouldn't even say a woman because Lynn, I guess, could be a man. I don't even know for sure if it's a woman or a man. But anyway, Lynn Venable, and it's about a bank teller who loves to read. He loves to read. Not only does he love to read, he's obsessed with reading. He's a bibliophile. He loves to read so much that he reads at work. And he's a bank teller, and he's making mistakes because he's constantly reading and not paying attention to his job. And one of his daily rituals is to get away from his boss and the customers, he will take his lunch break in the vault, in the bank vault. So he'll go and he'll take a book and he'll go down to the vault and to get away and read. And one day he goes down to the vault to read, and there's a gigantic bang, and his glasses fall off, and he wears, very thick glasses, and he stumbles out of the vault to discover that there's been a bomb has been dropped. The nuclear war has started. The bomb has been dropped on America, and he very well may be the last man on Earth. And he's stumbling through the wreckage, finding his coworkers and his boss and everybody else. And the only thing that saved him was being in the bank vault. And you follow him through the episode, as he's searching for food and, is kind of scavenging, searching for it, see if there's anybody still alive, and gradually becoming more despondent, realizing that he very well may be the last person on Earth. And he finds a sporting goods store with a gun, and he finds a gun, and he finally decides, I'm gonna end things. God wouldn't want me to be like you. God wouldn't hold it against me if I ended my life right now, because there's nothing to live for. And the moment he's going to pull the trigger, he sees in the distance the public library. And the public library had been destroyed, but of course the books are all there. And so he goes crazy. He goes, oh, I have all the books. I have all the books that I can read, all the books I could ever want. He's going to set them up. I'm going to read these in January, and these in February, and these in March. And he sets them all up on the steps, and he sits down to read that first book. And I have time enough at last to read books. And he bends over to read the first book, and his glasses fall off and break on the concrete. And he's so blind, you see that, he can't read. He can't read a word, and he might as well be blind. And it's an ending that's a punch in the gut. I mean, it's just, I get goosebumps telling you about it, because I've seen it 50 times. It's a punch in the gut, because, at least as far as I'm concerned, this is the character in Twilight Zone history that did not deserve what he got. He did not. All he wanted to do was read, and this comes along, and Burgess Meredith's last lines are, "It's not fair. It's not fair at all." He's crying, and he's saying it's not fair, and that's what you feel as a viewer. I felt. I mean, you feel this is not fair. This is not poetic justice. This is maybe poetic, but it ain't justice. This is injustice, And it's one of the most famous twist endings in Twilight Zone history, and that is the twist ending from the short story, by the way. I mean, Rod didn't come up with that. That was the twist ending, so it's a terrific ending. And Rod saw it that way. Rod saw it as in the book, I quote from a letter that he responded to. Somebody had written to tell him how cruel that ending was. And he agrees. He says, yeah, we were going for irony, but we kind of came across as sadism. It was really pretty cruel. But the amazing thing is, years and years and years after seeing this episode 20 times and always thinking that was the only possible interpretation of that episode, I've heard from people who say, no, he got exactly what he deserved, because he wanted to be estranged from people. All he wanted to do was read. He didn't want to be around people. He wanted to deal with people. He didn't want to interact with people. He just wanted to read, and he blew off the humanity for his whole life. And now he's going to have to live without humanity because he had to go read, and now they're all taken away from him, and he's going to get his just desserts. And as nice as that may sound, or as reasonable as that may sound, I think it's nonsense. I think it's bull. There's no way, because I think for what's on the screen, if you really see what's on the screen, it's not that he wants to get away and read. He's constantly trying to share his love of books with people, with his wife, who's one of the worst characters in Twilight Zone history. She tears the pages out of his books and scribbles on the pages. But he tries to share his love of reading with his wife. He wants to read poetry to her. He tells her, "Oh, there's some beautiful things in here. Let me read this to you." Or he tells his boss, "Have you ever read David Copperfield? I want to tell you about the character. There's this character in there. That's amazing." And so it was never totally an internal thing with him. And it wasn't like he was just talking to these people, like talking down at them, saying how much I love this book. And, he wanted to share it with them. He wanted to dialogue. He wanted the dialogue. So I think he was always yearning for human companionship. It was just that in this world, and by this world, I mean the world of that episode, not necessarily the world we live in. I think that, and this is a point I make in the book, I think that world of that episode is not necessarily our world, even before the bomb drops. I think before the bomb drops, that world is a dystopia. It's a world where intelligence is shunned upon, frowned upon and shunned. It's a world where the word Rita is an epithet. I mean, his boss calls him, "You are a Rita." Like it's the worst thing in the world, like
pejorative.
Like it's an epithet. Yeah, it's a pejorative. I mean, his wife is a terrible, terrible woman who thinks that reading all literature is doggerel. I mean, so this is a world that really hates the written word and hates literature, I think. And so he was living in that world, and so he found himself to be the only one who had this love of words, and he wanted to share it with people, and there was no way to share it in this particular setting.
Maybe that's one that Rod Serling, if he could have, he would have taken that back and maybe did a rewrite. We'll take another time out, come back. A few minutes remain with Nicholas Parisi as we commemorate the legacy of Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. Stay with us.
In times of economic uncertainty and chaos, your money means nothing. You may not even be able to get it from your bank or ATM. And the money you do have in the stock market will go down and down. What you can bank on is gold and silver. Gold and silver have been a reliable and trusted form of currency for thousands of years. Gold and silver have never been worth zero, and typically gold holds its value during economic turmoil. Call the Gold Hotline now and learn how to protect your money and your assets with gold and silver. And learn how to set up a new IRA or roll over your current one into a gold-backed IRA. Protect your money from the next market crash with gold and silver. Call now for your free gold guide.
800-461-9694. 800-461-9694. 800-461-9694. That's 800-461-9694.
Do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Are you being audited or investigated? Has the IRS sent you a letter demanding payment? You may not owe what they claim. Make this free call to the tax doctor now. Let them negotiate with the IRS on your behalf.
800-626-4512. 800-626-4512. That's 800-626-4512.
If you're a diabetic, we have great news. You can end the painful finger sticks with a new CGM. Plus, they may be covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance. If you test and inject daily, you may qualify. Call US Med now to learn more.
800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. 800-817-2974. That's 800-817-2974.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Nicholas Parisi stays with us, and we're talking about the great late Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. A favorite non-Rod Serling episode for you? Would it be the Howling Man?
Yes, I think that would probably be my top. Yeah. For a long time, that was probably my favorite episode, period, actually. And over the years, it's kind of slipped a little bit, but I still love it. Yeah, it's probably my favorite. Yeah.
So, tell us about the episode. What happens?
Howling Man is written by Charles Beaumont, based on his short story, and it's about a man on a walking trip through Europe during World War II, and or before World War II, and he gets lost in a storm, and he stops at a castle or a monastery for help, for shelter from the storm. He just wants to stay for a little while, and they try to turn him away. No, you can't stay here. And why can't I stay here? I just want some food. Just give me a night, and they can't stay here. Well, it turns out that the brothers there believe that they have locked up the devil. They caught the devil, and have him locked up in a cell. And of course, they don't want anybody to know about it. Certainly not somebody who just walked in off the street. And he, they tell him to stay away from the door. Don't listen to him howling. He's going to howl. He's going to try to get out. Just don't pay attention to him. And despite all the warnings, he doesn't believe them, and he lets the man who thinks is just a man out, and the man turns into the devil, and he is the devil, and he escapes. And so for the rest of this man's life, he's going to dedicate himself to making up for what he did. He's going to recapture the devil. And the end of the episode, he shows that, yes, he did. He recaptured him, and he has to go out to call Brother Jerome to bring him back. But he has a maid there. Don't go near the door. And of course, the maid goes to the door and lets him out again. So, and the catch at the end of the episode, the closing narration is, you can catch the devil, but you can't hold him long. So I always loved that episode, the visuals of it, the direction of it. It's a scary episode. It's a great one.
Where does, on your list of top 10, or maybe it's not in your top 10, I don't know, I don't want to be presumptuous here, Terror at 20,000 Feet with William Shatner?
I usually put that maybe just outside my top 10, somewhere like 11, 12, somewhere in there. Yeah, it's a great episode. Shatner is great in it. I defend William Shatner to the end. If anybody thinks William Shatner overacts, he's a bad actor, watch Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. It's a great performance and an understated performance, especially compared to John Lithgow in the movie version of it. So yeah, I put that just right outside my top 10, bro.
This is Richard Matheson's episode, right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just give us briefly a summary. What happens?
That's Bob Wilson is William Shatner's character's name. Bob Wilson is flying home with his wife from a mental institution. He had been in an asylum. He had a nervous breakdown. I shouldn't say an asylum, but he had a nervous breakdown, and he was in an institution for a while. And his nervous breakdown occurred on an airplane. And he's flying home from that with his wife, and he looks out the window and he sees a creature on the wing of the plane. And of course, in true Twilight Zone fashion, he's the only one who can see the creature. Every time anybody else looks out the window, the creature has floated away or jumped away, and he can't convince anybody that there's a creature on the wing of the plane. But he has to trust his own senses. He has to trust that, yeah, I'm not going crazy. I'm not losing it. There is a creature out there. And he's able to steal a gun from a security officer on the plane, opens the hatch and starts shooting at the gremlin. And the plane is able to land through the storm and everything else. And again, they think he's crazy. He's in a straitjacket, and he says he's okay. And he says, yeah, I know I'm okay. I'm the only one who does know right now. And then they pan up to the wing of the plane, and you see the wing of the plane has been clawed up, and it's torn up the planks. So something, lightning didn't do that. Something did. So soon enough, they're going to realize that he was right, that there was something on the plane.
Shatner's castmate on Star Trek, George Takei, Mr. Sulu on Star Trek, he appeared in an episode called The Encounter, and I haven't seen it, and I don't know whether it's because it wasn't included in the syndication. But what is so controversial about this episode, The Encounter?
Well, today, probably not too much, but at the time, it was considered controversial. And yes, it was not included in the initial syndication package, so it was not seen for like 25 years after it aired. And what was controversial about it was it's a good episode. It's about George Takei plays a gardener. He's a gardener for this man, and he's on the grounds, and this guy is cleaning out his attic. And George Takei goes up to meet this guy in the attic to talk about the yard or whatever it may be. And the guy has a samurai sword there. And they start talking about the samurai sword. And it turns out that the guy says that he got the samurai sword during World War II. He killed a Japanese soldier, and he took the samurai sword from him. And George Takei admits that during World War II, his family had helped to guide the planes into Pearl Harbor. That they were in Hawaii, and they helped to guide the planes to their targets. And many Asian American groups, of course, said, whoa. There is no evidence whatsoever that any Asian American was a spy, that aided the Japanese in the attack. And to insinuate that is really problematic. And I would agree. Even in a fictional setting, that's not a good message to be sending. So after the complaints, the episode it wasn't aired again, and they just held it as syndication. And now you can find it on, obviously, the DVD collections and things like that. It's a pretty good episode.
How did Rod Serling make out? He owned half of the show. With syndication, I mean, he should have been set for life.
You would think so, yeah. And he would have been if he hadn't sold his rights to the show back to CBS. This is probably the worst decision of Rod Serling's life. It's unfortunate. But what Rod Serling did was he owned half the show. He had half the films. He owned 50% right of the films and everything else. And Rod, after the show went off the air, he was very impatient with how long it took to get into syndication. One of the things, again, I think this is a misconception. I think people say, oh, he didn't know how much it would be worth, and he didn't know about syndication, and he didn't know about merchandising, and none of that's really true. He did know, but he was upset that, this is in letters, this is, I've read, his correspondence. He was upset that shows that lasted not as long as the Twilight Zone and ended their runs after the Twilight Zone were already in syndication making money, and the Twilight Zone was sitting there collecting dust. And why am I not getting my residual? Why isn't this in syndication? And he was upset. So he finally just said, screw it. And he didn't want to fight with them anymore. And he sold his interest back to CBS. And he sold his interest back to CBS for roughly $700,000 or $800,000. Now in 1965, $800,000 is probably about 8 million today. So it wasn't peanuts. I mean, it was a nice chunk of change, but it's worth 100 times that now. I mean, if he'd held on to it, his great grandchildren would have been set for life, and as it was, he was set and his kids were set, but that's pretty much probably about it.
Rod Serling, his life, work, and imagination. That's the book. Nicholas Parisi, and again, Serling Fest 2022, coming to Binghamton, New York in August. Go to serlingfest2022.com. And Nicholas, what a pleasure hanging out with you for the last 2 hours. I learned a lot.
Same here, Richard. Thanks so much. I had a great time.
All right, that's it for me. My thanks to Carlos and Ryan. Back next week with a brand new program. Hope you'll be along for the ride. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There's nothing concealed that won't be revealed. Nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light. What I say in a whisper, proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.